My name is Cordereo Bentley. I'm interviewing Clarence Hargo. Today is March 3rd. We are at NECIC building, 199 North Main Street. The time is 10:05 a.m. Thursday. How you doing, Mr. Hargo?
I'm doing just fine.
Were you born in Mansfield?
Yes, I was. I was born on, they call it Charles Street now, but when I was born, it was Henry Street, 92 Henry Street in Mansfield, Ohio. Where you call it Charles Street, where it's at now, Mount Hummer Baptist Church is on Charles Street, but when I was born, that was Henry Street.
Okay. What side of town is that on?
It's on the north end of town,
Okay.
by the mill.
Okay. Why did your family settle in Mansfield?
Well, my father, he migrated, I guess, from Tennessee, because he used to work in, I would say, I'm not specific on it, that he worked in some minefields from, it was outside of Knoxville, Tennessee, but I think it was called Rogers or something like that, Tennessee. And there was a mine down there. And as a young man, I guess he left there and came north.
Around what time you think that was?
That would be my sister was born here, she was born in 28, I'd say about 1925.
So, yeah, you do have, how many brothers and sisters do you have?
Living? I have
Just
one
us.
brother living, but I had 5 brothers. Well, 4 brothers and 1 sister.
What was life like in your family?
Like any family, it wasn't anything that was exceptional. Just that we raised up, went to school, and that was it.
Like growing up, what did y'all do like for fun and stuff like that?
What will you do? Okay, now you're going back to a time when basically you mostly didn't migrate out of your neighborhood. Now for me and everybody as a kid, Johns Park was our focal point for sports. That's where on that end of town, there's the only park that was there. And they had a softball field there, play softball in the summer. And on the other end, which is down toward Johns Avenue, which is more leveled off, then we played football. There were no basketball courts or anything like that at Johns Park. So basically that we did. So we would, if any field was available, like on the street over there on Lewis Street down the bottom, it's not like it is now, it was cleared off. Well, we wouldn't say we cleared it off, but we played softball there, our own invention, whatever we had. That's what we played with. It's like if you happen to run across a ball, and we had a ball, that's what we played with until the thing got warped out of side or whatever it is, until you got another. And then if you play football, we played football right there too. So basically, then put a backboard up, and we played on a telephone pole. That's how we played basketball. So generally, in your own area, that's what we did. As we got older, and we got, I'd say maybe like your teen years, when we would start to intermingle outside our neighborhood, like maybe, basically, you would say, we had the kids play, that was over on Daisy Street, Lily Street, Orchard Street, and around there where kids were. That way, then we would become like, you would, competitive, you say. They used to call that end of town sometimes tombstone territory. and then they call it the camps. And we would play, or roughly say, we played what they would call the company line. The company line was back across Longview over there where Warm Rock place is now. Well, that used to be a neighborhood. And they we used to call them a reformatory Wise Road, and we have competition between them. We designate a spot. Usually we played at over on North Main Street, fire station number 4. They had a field there. And that's where we play football in the summertime there. And generally we didn't go too far out of that range. Then we grew, it started widening the scope. We used to play what we call the guys off of 2nd Street. In that area down around 2nd Street. And then that's how it was. But in our youth, a lot of us met at the old Friendly House, which was on Main Street, and where Volunteers is now, whatever you want to call it. But Friendly House used to be there. And like after, especially on Saturdays, that's where everybody used to go. They played basketball inside. I mean, when you would play inside, dodgeball. Friday nights used to be, they show old movies, Bob Steele, all those kind of old Western stuff. In that gym in there, and you sit around on the floor. And then they had some rooms upstairs, but generally there wasn't anything that pertained to us. But I knew that's why I first got started as a Boy Scout. That's the only place where I knew that they had one. Didn't progress very far, but that's where I got to start as a Boy Scout. I got to Tenderfoot as far as I got because it didn't seem to get too, carried away with it. And then basically that's where the activities were.
Okay. Where did your parents work?
Where did my parents work? My father worked at the steel mill. My mother was, first she used to be, what would you call it, housekeeper or domestic, as you want to say it. Then from there she worked at Mansfield General Hospital. She worked out there from the middle 40s. She retired from there in 1966 or 67 is when she retired from there. But basically her life was, she worked at Mansfield General Hospital.
Was she like a nurse?
No, she was kitchen. She worked on the 2nd floor kitchen, as they would call it up there. Hospital not like it is now. Back then they called different floor. She was on the 2nd floor, head of that kitchen up there.
Okay. Where did you go to school?
I went to school. My grade school year was at Bowman Street, John Simpson, and senior high. When I went to Bowman Street School, it was segregated. I had my 1st and 2nd grade teacher was Miss Helen W. Joyce. My 3rd and 4th grade teacher was, my 3rd grade was, her name was Miss Beck, but Miss Beck, I think she got sick and left, and the other teacher was Miss Barnett. So we say in the middle of the 3rd grade, 4th grade was Miss Barnett. 5th grade, I was with Miss Ruth Carter. And then it integrated in my 6th grade year. And my first teacher there was Miss White. From there, I went to John Simpson. From John Simpson, I went to senior high.
Can you tell us a little bit about the segregation? What did that mean for you as a student?
It didn't mean anything because generally, it, say like in our neighborhood out there, it was it was integrated. That neighborhood was integrated. I mean, it wasn't just, all predominantly one. And then eventually it evolved into a black community. But when I was a kid growing up, there used to be, well, I don't know if you'd say, how you put them, I don't say if they were Slavic or whatever they were in that neighborhood, because they all worked at that mill. The steel mill used to have a cafeteria in it. Now that cafeteria did not cater to blacks. They didn't eat in there. Across the street, you could start, basically, that neighborhood started from what is now is Crystal Springs, Lewis, Charles, Harmon, Grandview, Fern. Then there was another street there before they built the expressway across there called John Long. On the other side of the street, there was another little short street there, and one was Madison, and I can't think of what the other one was. But those, but all the way up Bowman Street, starting from Crystal Spring to Longview, which you call Longview, was different ethnic, well, we wouldn't call it ethnic, but they mostly were Slavic, Macedonian, whatever you want to call it, little bars. And they had little restaurants. We did not go in those. I went in them because I started a paper route. And they used to go in there, and they were some of my customers. And that's how I went in, but you didn't, blacks didn't patronize those places.
So if they couldn't eat in the cafeterias, where did they go? Would they just have to bring their own, carried it in?
Yeah.
Okay.
So back to school, were you involved in any activities in school?
Basically, no. I mean, activities in school weren't that, to say like a blackbird, inspiring, or anything to do like that, other than sports. Now in sports, if far back you want to go, we can remember when Bowman Street School, when it was like it was. Okay, now, you look, I don't know if anybody ever got them, what they ever did with them, but Bowman Street School had a whole lot of trophies for football and basketball. I mean, in the elementary pros like that, and we were doing. And for a while, for a long time, even when I was in grade school, I can remember this, is that we didn't play at the same time other kids played. But I don't know how it came about that you used to shoot marbles. You used to have marble tournaments. Okay? And I did get into that. I don't know how they got us in that I got in to play for who was the best marble shooter in the school.
So was that something organized by the school, or was it just the kids saying,
Well,
let's
it
get
was
to...
organized by the school. They had this little, the only thing they had. They had no softball at Crevlin. They had a softball field back behind the school down there. And they played softball there. And then they would play with other schools, grade schools. Even when I was coming along, they used to have, like on Saturdays, you'd have grade schools playing softball, either at the Friendly House or at the Salvation Army. And that's how you intermingled with that. Basically, that's what the only time it did, if you were involved in anything, was through these categories like that you integrate.
And you say they were integrated, those sport teams? Oh, no,
well,
so they were separate?
They were separate, yeah.
Okay.
Because, I mean, you don't have the schools now, there was Newman, West Fifth, Brinkerhoff, Western, called it Rebecca Grubauer after that, but it was Western when I was going there. Bushnell was eliminated. Hedges School, and those were the basic grade schools. They would hold these basketball games either at the friendly house on Saturday mornings or whenever it was, and at Salvation Army, if you want to have a little scrimmage around, they had a gym up there at the Salvation Army. And basically, as a youth growing up, this is our activities. It's not the idea of saying they were segregated, but it would be those kids from those schools that played at these things. And if you're, well, that's the way it was. And the athletic activities were mostly in charge of, I'm trying to think of the man's name, Fife. His name was, I know his last name was right, I don't know if it was John Fife or what, but he was, I guess for the educational standpoint, the coordinator of these sports things for grade school activities. He also was, I don't know how it came about, but I guess it's right, I was still young when my father passed away, that I don't know how it came about, but it was, I think it was through him that he got somebody to sponsor me to go to the Y. And that's how I got involved in that little sports group at the Y, which was integrated. I mean, it didn't have anything, but at the Y, and that's the only place to go swimming. They had a swimming pool, so that's where I learned how to swim, was at the Mansfield Y through, I think his name is John Fife, that got me sponsored. Somebody sponsored me, paid my fee, to go to the Y, which was up on Park Avenue, next to where First Lutheran Church is, right in that area, little old skinny building. And then got involved in sports, playing, basketball. Basically, that's all you could do up there is play basketball and swim. Or not swim. They had other, well, they had to have, but I wasn't in that. But I know a kid that was, and that was Chuck Anderson. He came from 2nd Street, he stayed on 2nd Street. And they used to have a contest, I guess, for all over Mansfield. And he was what they call the first Superman at the YMCA. Like trampoline, jumping, whatever else they did. But I wasn't involved in it, but I knew he was in it.
So what year did you graduate from high school?
1954.
Did you go to college?
I had 1 year when I was in the service, and then finished it out there.
Where was that at?
Louisville, University of Louisville. From the campus, you went to, after, while I was stationed there, could take classes at the University of Louisville.
What was your first job? What was your first job?
My first job?
Mm-hmm.
My first job was dishwashing at Mansfield General Hospital.
What year was that?
Starting from 53. I worked after school, 53, 54, and I left there in 55. My next job after that was with Blake's Pastries, which was on the square, but they built the Mansfield Shopping Center, West Park Shopping Center, and I started there when it opened up in 1956. This time of year, there's only 3 stores open: Blake's Pastries, Kroger's, and Moore's. There's a place called Moore's.
What was Moore's?
What
was Moore's?
Moore's was like a little automotive store. Well, not automotive. It sold a little bit of everything. Tires for a car, battery. You could buy nails, hammer, tools.
So sort of hardware store kind of?
No, it wasn't a hardware store.
No.
It's just
A little bit of everything.
well, not a little bit of everything, but it used to be, you remember, well, I don't know, you guys would, they call them Western Auto. You ever heard of Western Auto? You know, I don't think there's any more around now, but there used to be. It was on Moore's was almost on par with something like that, where they just sold a little bit of everything. You know, not a little bit of everything, but just different kind of stuff. That's about all it was. But that's all Moore's was.
So what was the square like when you say you worked at the was it a pastry shop, a bakery?
Yeah, Bakery Road Square.
Yeah, what was it like up there at that time?
No, it just, well, before they cut through, but you know, I used to be, people say, you know, you drive around the square like that. And you had Reed's over there, Sears was used, Sears was down over there. And then there's, down behind that was, think of a Quality Furniture Store. Then you had Ingram Road, used to be down on the corner of 3rd and Diamond. You had the bank up there, which was Citizens Bank at that particular time. Mansfield Building along the next door to it, H.L. Reed, Kohlbackers. Across the street was at a Woolworth store, Gresky's, Neisner's. Woolworth's on the square, Gresky's going to the square right there on the corner. Neisner was down on by 3rd Street. Montgomery Ward's was over on 3rd and 3rd and Walnut was Montgomery Ward's. J.C. Penney's was on Park Avenue by, Harry Jewelry's up there now, but right next door to that's where J.C. Penney's used to be. And then there was a cafeteria, Parkway Cafeteria, over on another corner. Madison Theater, Fox Jewelry, Farmers Bank. Going up a little bit more, Park Avenue Bakery was up there on Park Avenue. Isley store up there on the corner. Church over there. Telephone company was across the street from that on Park Avenue. Moorhead's Ford was over there. Leland Hotel was there. Across the street was Schuster's Garage, where a lot of people used to work. A lot of people that I knew that, used to work on the weekend and stuff. They used to park cars for people who stayed in Leland Hotel in Schuster's Garage, which was across the street. Max Diner was right there. And you had Mathis clothing stores up there. There's another little restaurant, Wong May Restaurant was over on the corner. Southern Hotel was over there. Park Theater was down on the corner. And the whiskey store was up there on that corner. Well, not on the corner, but right in that area, going around the square like that. That's what it was like when I was a kid growing up.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your other jobs? Like what else did you do? You told us about your kind of first 3 jobs. You said the last one you mentioned was at West Park, or?
Well, my first job, what I said, was at Mansfield General Hospital.
Right.
I worked in the dish room.
Right.
I washed dishes after school.
Right.
From 3 to 7, whatever it was.
And then you said you were at the bakery, and then
after I, the man who used to bring baked goods to the hospital saw me and gave me my chance. The lady that was the dietitian in charge of the kitchen at General Hospital, her name is Louise Morgan, and she was over there always while she said she won't try to make a cook out of me. But because of, it was all women that worked in there, they didn't want no men. Then me being who I am, they wouldn't want me. So they were in planning stages of building West Park Shopping Center, and the man, Blake's Pastries, he brought the baked goods there, knew me, and he asked me if I would go, ask her if, let me go. She said, I'll let him go if you teach him how to bake. So he said, sure. So
Okay, so
that's how I left there.
did you do anything after Blake's Pastries? What was after that?
After Blake Pastries?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was in the service.
Okay.
I went to the Army. I came back to Blake Pastries. After Blake's Pastries, that was, you might remember it, but it would be 1972, 73 is when Richard M. Nixon rose prices on everything. Wages, products, and that happened to be the same year that all contracts for steel, rubber, automotive, they all failed during that same time, and they froze everything. So, after that, a year later, it was 72 or 73, but a year later, after that happened, he took the price control off of food and stuff, and it went sky high. That was when I was working there, I could buy 10 pounds of sugar for $1. I could get 100 pounds of sugar for $10. I could get a bag, well, I mean, he could get a bag of flour for X amount, but they took the price off. In trying to stabilize all this, you try to substitute what you do when the prices went off on all that stuff. And they just, everything they knew what you did, they changed that, and they couldn't compete. So I left there. I had to leave, well, I left there because they were getting ready to close up, couldn't compete. So I left there, and I went to Mansfield Tire. I was a tire builder. And you know what happened to Mansfield Tire? Went bankrupt.
Okay. I knew they closed.
Same year that the blizzard hit.
78.
You know when the blizzard hit? In 78. First part of January. The blizzard hit. Well, I was there. That's where I was working at when it hit. And I was there for 2 days. Couldn't get out. They couldn't do anything. They couldn't service the machine. All the material that was there to build tires, they had already done. They couldn't do any. Vending machines, there was nothing in them. Nobody get there to service them. So we was in there. So
Oh, you was trapped?
Mansfield Tire was almost on the north end of town. So I walked up to Longview, down Longview, to Bowman, to home. I mean, well, I didn't stay there. I stayed way out. I couldn't get out there. But my brother stayed on Fern. So I walked to my brother. So that's where I stayed at him. When they could start back up work, I went back to work, and that's when they made a decision. And February was my last month at the Mansfield Tire. That was 1978. February 1978. So I was on unemployment till the man who hired me at Blake's Pastries, I stayed in contact, I knew him there, and he had worked for a bakery in Guyers, wherever it was. But he was over there in Guyers and Gallion. Hawkins was getting ready to start a bakery in Ashland on Center Street. So he called me and asked me, would I come to work for him? Well, I didn't have a job. I said, well, sure. So I left after Mansfield Tire was already closed, so I went to work for Hawkins in 1978, May, because Hawkins' fiscal year starts in June. He did. So I went to work. He asked me if I hired on then, some kind of way. But anyways, I started at Hawkins in Ashland, 1978, and I worked over there for a year while they built the one here in Mansfield. So, meantime, I had applied for a job at the Wild Brass. September of '78, the Wild Brass called me. I got a job at the Wild Brass. So I worked at Hawkins at night, and I worked at Wild Brass in the afternoon.
Busy man.
So, you know what happened to the Wild Brass?
I know they closed, but I don't know.
Yeah, but I was still working at Hawkins. I didn't give the Hawkins up.
Okay,
But you
tell
know
us
what happened to
about
Wild Brass? The Wild Brass shut down, and they had two sides to it. They shut down the foundry side, and they kept the brass side over where you call it the brass side, over on the other side. And back and forth, back and forth. So, when they shut down, me being one of the youngest people, you had to go. So, Mansfield Foundry was started. They bought employees on Mansfield Foundry, which was a spinoff, but it's an employee on from the Wild Brass. They gave them a good deal, you know, and that's when this Mansfield Foundry started up. So I worked at Mansfield Foundry. So employee-owned situation, couldn't cut it. So we were bought by an outfit out of Cleveland, and he kept it running, calling it something else. He was, what do you call them, leverage buyout or whatever you want to call them, like this. That's all they did. Just buy something up, start it up and get it, and then sell it off somebody else. After they left, Citation, Mansfield Citation, it became Mansfield Foundry Citation. And then Citation closed up. But I still worked at Hawkins. Now,
How is it different today?
how's what different today?
Like what is what was the neighborhood like? Sorry, I should ask you that first.
The neighborhood was, well, you had your ups and downs, but the neighborhood basically was just intermingled, just a neighborhood of people looking out for people. Until it started changing, basically I'd say in the mid-50s, that neighborhood started changing. It became more like you would say a black neighborhood. Mostly all your other Slavics or whoever they were, you know, had moved out. They slowly moved out. And then Mansfield started expanding. I'd like to go back and tell you that when I was coming up, young, Longview was Mansfield city limits. So where we were at was Madison Township. Then it expanded into Mansfield City. They start going out that way until you got to where you were, well, not where you're at now, it just kept moving and moving and moving. But that's how your neighborhood changed. When I was coming along, all that area out there was fields. You had two roads out there, I think it Warren and Harding and Pomerine, I think. Those were the only three roads that were right there. And scarcely, if anything, anybody lived there. Because we used to go out through there. We used to pick blackberries, whatever you want to call it. And on Lewis Street, if you're on Lewis Street, you can go, at the end of Lewis Street, you go up, we call it Roxy Hill. You go up Roxy Hill and through the woods, and you're at Westbrook Country Club. In my childhood, up the hill, Westbrook Country Club. In the wintertime, they chased us off if they caught us. We would come out of those woods, you come across, I don't know what hole it is at Westbrook Country Club, But you come down a little slope like that and you go straight across the green and down the hill. And we used to have, well, old sheet metal, you used to make it like a toboggan, the slide. You could go, oh man, you could go, the road down there was Warren Road. Go almost Warren Road on that toboggan. Summertime, their pond they had over on Warren Road, they had a pond there where the guys tee off at. That's where we used to swim. Cause we had no swimming pools. They had swimming pools, but we weren't allowed in the swimming pools. So that's where I knew how to swim it from the Y, so we used to go swimming out there. Until they come by, the golf pro would come by, chase us out, and we run out across the woods over there in the bushes until they leave, and then go back and swim some more.
So, what was life like for African Americans in Mansfield?
After what?
What was life like for African Americans in Mansfield in the 1940s and 50s? What was life like?
Well, everybody socialized in their own group. I mean, basically, because, I mean, even now today, you still see, because I was reading a letter to the editor when the man, they're talking about closing that branch out there, post office. And he gave a reference to, he said, what's it like, the people have to go back down into the flats. Now, if you've been around Mansfield, how they call the flats, where it used to be, that was where most of the blacks had their little nightclubs. Was in 6th Street, 5th Street, Main Street, to Adams, around that area, that vicinity. It was called a flat. Now, that's where most of your black people had their entertainment. And you wouldn't know it. Growing up, when it would be late 50s, when Ferguson put the Blue Note up there. They made that nice little nightclub up there. Okay, now that, in that area around through there is where all these little bars and stuff they had. Now that was where they had their entertainment. That was what life was like. But I tell you, it wasn't bad. It was nice, had fun. Wasn't too much involved with it.
So was it primarily bars, or, I mean, was there other type restaurants and things like that? Or what sort of things?
I had a few restaurants around through there. Well, one, I know that you didn't go in it. You could go in it and order and take it out. The man that said he's quitting his business, Chris Cafe. He used to be down there on Main Street. People stopping there and yeah. When I got older and had a job, I could go in there and order some goulash and take it home. Mm-hmm. And then you had the merry-go-round, that was another white little place right there on the corner, 6th and Main. It was called a merry-go-round, but we didn't go in there.
And that was
the street. There's a Mayor drugstore, but the little predominant bars, black bars, right along that area, starting from 6th up to 5th. Then back over like on Franklin, you had a couple of rates, but wouldn't say that you had restaurants like that. There's places you could eat, but mostly everybody, well, you wouldn't think you'd understand what it was. It was like, people used to call them after-hour spots. Now those people serve food. And you did a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And that was during that era, in the 40s. Maybe the 40s and the 50s. That's what it was, until they start expanding out. And then you had black bars. Bowman Street had them, 3 or 4 of them out there on Bowman Street.
Now, did they offer entertainment? Were there like bands or?
Blue Note, the only place had a band.
That was
the place where they used to have another different kind of band and stuff. Um, it was little, I wasn't old enough to do it, to go, but if I, up on, what is that? Third, yes, Third and Diamond. They used to have, there was a nightclub there, it's called, what the heck was it called? But anyways, they used to have live entertainment there, and several musicians from Mansfield, Hiawatha, I don't know if you ever heard of Hiawatha. Hiawatha used to play at Ringside, that's what it was, Ringside nightclub.
It's
And
funny.
they have a band. Okay, used to go, but I knew of it, but I was not allowed in there because I was not old enough to go in there at that particular time. That'd be in your 40s and mid-50s.
I just recently saw a photograph of Hiawatha, and I wondered, was he a jazz musician? Is that
Yeah,
what?
he's a
Did
jazz
you ever get to see him play or anything like
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
I mean, you snuck in and you could see it until they found out you was there, and then they put you out because I wasn't old enough. I mean, it's not like you nowadays. You can go in places. If you weren't 21, and a lot of the people, older people that was in there, knew me and my brothers, because I had 3 older brothers, and if they happened to be around, you know, they throw me out. Yeah, go, where you go. But yeah, I used to do it. Then I used to have little jive bands played around here. I wasn't old enough to go there. They had one, the American Legion was on Diamond Street. It was down Diamond Street, right around there. Now, they used to have little jive bands and stuff played in there, you know. But I couldn't go in there, so I wouldn't know. Hear about it, but they didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
How did racial bias affect you?
None.
None.
I mean, I never had a problem. I knew it existed, I knew it was there, but I never had in Mansfield, I never had a confrontation with it. I had a confrontation when I was in the service, but not here.
So
Because when I was in the service at the wrong time, here at the wrong time, I tell you.
it was racialness, like
Hmm?
it was racial acts in the service.
In the service,
Yeah.
that's when they were going through all the marches. Martin Luther King, I met, marched with his brother, Louisville. And told when I got went to Louisiana. Where we opened up, when I was went in, we was building up Vietnam. Opened up Fort Pope. Fort Pope is like swampland in Louisiana. It had been closed since the end of World War II. They opened it back up for training. And you were told, do not go to New Orleans, Baton Rouge. Don't go into those cities. Louisiana borders Mississippi. Don't go to Mississippi. So, also in Tennessee, because we came down the other end of Tennessee, you weren't allowed to stop here. I remember one place in Tennessee, we was on our way, brand new golf station. Had to use the restroom. Had to use the outhouse. And come on down. I ate on the bus. I went to Virginia. We flew in, got off the plane. I was not allowed in the terminal. They brought a box lunch out it was in the summertime, under the tarmac. And that's where we ate a box lunch, under the wing of that airplane. Out of shape.
And at this time, you were a serviceman.
I was a serviceman, yes.
Wow.
You were told, do not go into any participation in uniform. The United States government will not stand for you, for the military, if anybody dressed in military, being involved in any of that confrontation. If you went in civilian clothes, and if you got caught or whatever happened to you and you didn't get back to base, you're AWOL. These are the things that like I said, I was in there at the wrong time. These are the confrontations I ran across. But here in Mansfield, I did all right in Mansfield. I knew it existed. It still exists. Right now, it can still exist. It's you got certain ways where you do.
Did the civil rights movement affect you any?
Sure. If you're black, it affected you a great deal, my good man.
How would you say?
A heck of a lot.
How would you say? In what ways?
It eliminated a lot of stuff, man. It eliminated a whole lot of stuff. I mean, you accepted it going someplace without question. I couldn't go in a certain place, and it was questioned. Even when I was inducted in the service and I went down through the South. Now there was only one black person on the bus, and that was me. And the guys I left from Mansfield with, they stuck by me. I mean, you say, how did this affect you? They stuck by me because we got to this we were on the Greyhound bus. Where the heck it was. Oh, in Louisville, they told us that this is your last civilian meal. So we got off the bus. And we was going in the restaurant. Colored over here, light over there. I made the mistake. I was walking with the guys from Mansfield. I wasn't paying no attention. Walked in. The place got quiet. And looked around, and then I saw the sign. It says colored. So the guys from Mansfield, we all went in to the colored side. And this is where it gets you at. The girl who was waiting on us was so overwhelmed because she had to get the food on the other side. They fix it over there and hand it over to her to serve you over here. Well, they was ordering so much because they said they wouldn't be getting it anymore. So they wanted to send the white help over to hand her, and they told them no. The guys told them from Mansfield said no. Said, we can't eat over there. Don't be working over here. That's how it was.
So can you tell me about your church?
My church?
Yeah, you go to what church you go to?
Oh, what do you want to know about it?
Like what is the role of the church like in the community? Like what?
It's pretty stable, but you see nowadays, you take back then, they couldn't have too much of a role in anything because your mode of transportation was kneel. The only thing you in our community you would say like, okay, so I went to Mount Herman. And St. John's was down on Harker Street. And those were two predominant black churches in the area, north end area out there where I was at then, at that particular time. So, that's where it was. What was the activity? They tried, what activities could you have? You couldn't do anything. Every once in a while they tried. When I was a kid, they used to try to sponsor a trip in the summertime, take them to, Cedar Point didn't exist. It was a little thing up there, but it didn't exist. The main thing up in Sandusky, they called it Crystal Beach. So they would try in the summertime, rent a bus, and that's how my age group and kids, would take us up to Crystal Beach for a day of thing. Once a year, that's when it happened. I mean, any other activity, what could they sponsor? There was no place to take them. I mean, activities at the time when I was coming along as a kid was nil. What would they take them to? That's where it was. But I mean, the church was there. It was a vibrant force, and I mean, they had different things. You had for kids, they tried to. But actually, I went to church. I went to Sunday school. I went to church, and everything. But other than that, that's all it was.
Some of the ladies that we've interviewed mentioned something that they called going churchin' on Sundays.
Well,
Does
yeah.
that mean anything to you? Do you?
I mean, I'm young. I mean, back then, I'm young. Now, where would I meet a girl at? Church.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't no, I mean, there were no social groups. I mean, there wasn't any, I would say, yeah, the Friendly House used to have a thing called the Jack and Jill Club, and it was a black thing, and it was on Wednesday night. Another time was Monday night, what they would call, that's the only time they did it. We called it Monday Night Skating at the old Coliseum. Now that was a big event for us because that's where you met from all parts of the town would be at Coliseum on Monday night. And on Wednesday night, you would have Jack and Jill Club. It's like a little dance thing at the Friendly House. So basically, that was your entertainment, except for the movies, which back in my day wasn't no easy thing to get movie fare. I mean, even though it was cheap, you weren't working. The kids, I mean, back then they weren't working. Selling milk bottles, you used to get 3 cents for a milk bottle. Nickel for a ginger ale bottle used to become a ginger ale bottle. And a penny for a pop bottle. That's when everything was in glass. And you trade them back into the store. You take the bottles to the store and they give you a penny for it. I mean, you had. So that's the only way you raise money. There wasn't no jobs for them to do. What were you going to do? If you didn't have a job, I mean, there is a strain to get there. The only way you could get there would be the bus.
Gosh, could you tell us about like your fondest memory growing up on the North End?
My who?
Your fondest memory, like just a real great memory you got.
Actually, offhand, I couldn't tell you. Everything I had just is a memory to me, but this isn't anything that's outstanding. But I will say this. I'm glad I came along in the era that I did. I came along in, I wouldn't say about one of the best eras you could have. I saw World War II. I saw the Korean War. I saw the Vietnam War and all the other stuff that's come along. But all the changes that I went through all these stages, is a memorable event. This, I mean, I'm saying for me, I don't know about anybody else, but I live in an era that I will remember of seeing so much change. So much. And I say youth, like you and him, you're seeing changes, but nothing like what came through. I mean, any of the big events. I mean, they were really, truly big events. For me, I mean, as as a black American, these events that I see transpire is really something. I lived them. I went through some of the agonies and whatever it did. I mean, it didn't actually, harm me in any way. But now, as I sit back and look at it, I marvel at it. I really do, because I'm happy to say that I lived through a time when I saw some of the biggest changes in America's life. some of the things that happen, events.
Do you have any you have any bad memories? Like some memories like around here that you would like to forget about?
I never considered things as say like a bad memory, whatever you want to call it. It's something that happened, but it's a thought-provoking memory, because I can look back now and I can think I said what it was and what I would do now, entirely two different things. It didn't alter me in too many ways. It gave me more of a inside feeling that I'm grateful to live through all that and come out the way I am, unharmed. I mean, you get scars on a lot of things, but I don't regret them. I'm glad I lived them.
Is there anything else you would like to add that we haven't covered?
Anymore.
Anything else you'd like to add that we haven't touched on? Or
What
anything you want to say?
you want to cover.
I have a couple of quick questions.
Okay.
Just what branch of the service were you in?
Army?
In the Army, okay. Are you a married man?
No, not now.
No. Okay.
I was, but
Okay.
not now.
Any kids or anything?
Yeah, I have two kids. I have two daughters.
Okay.
One's in D.C. and one's in, she's down below Woodbridge, Virginia. I was telling a few times I didn't get to talk too much to her that I was in Virginia. What I experienced there in Virginia. Because, now, I would tell you this, it didn't change me, but I was in Virginia when the school segregation was going on. Now, young man, if you want to see something that is devastating, it didn't devastate me, that is devastating, is seeing a kid could not go to school. They shut them down, all the schools. Then they made private schools. You being a black child had no place to go. Those kids out just roaming, nothing to do. They were just out roaming. Nothing, no school, no, unless somebody was teaching them at home or someplace, in a church or something like that, trying to educate them. But these kids had no school to go to. They were not funded. Teachers weren't there for them. They couldn't go to another school. I mean, where were they going to go? Now, I went through that. And I saw these kids, they would do anything to try to raise a nickel or a dime. Back then, nickel or dime, you could still buy something. But others saying that is, I would say yes. That's one thing that I saw that I remember the most to see. It didn't devastate me, but it shook my mind, to see these kids could not go to school. And there was no reason for it. Well, there's a reason for it, they said. But this, it really did. You being a young man, and you got the chance that you can go to any school, or well, not any school, but mostly any place you want to, if you want to, apply and try. You just think about it if you couldn't go to school.
Pretty awful.
I mean, you wouldn't learn anything. I mean, TV wasn't like it is now.
You think it's better now or worse now?
They didn't even have a TV. Barely had FM radio. And that's all they had. They got up in the morning, nothing. Nothing to do. Nothing. That's one thing, that sticks out in my mind more than anything, if you wanna know.
That's fantastic.
That's
Um,
crazy. Can't believe it. I mean, like, what
I
was
think
the
our tapes probably weren't
what
as
was the reason they said they weren't funded? It just no explanation.
Segregation,
Just segregation.
when they said they desegregate the schools, and they didn't wanna do it, they just closed the schools.
What year? Ron, what year was this?
60, 61, 62. This was in Virginia. Wouldn't have known, but this was Virginia. Prince Edward County, Prince George County. That's the way the names of the counties are in Virginia. They had nothing to do.
Okay, I was just wondering if figures like O.C. Hill here in Mansfield, if that name means anything to you, or
Sure.
if you could tell us a little bit about him and the things he did.
Yeah, O.C. Hill. I remember him very well because O.C. Hill, when he was in this, well, I knew him for a long, but I was a kid. He was in the service, and when he came home on leave, well, O.C. Hill, the place is still there, where his parents used to stay on Bowman Street. The house is still there, the little thing, and he was he was home on leave, and we stopped on my way to school. Well, Mr. Hill had a car, and we'd say, "O.C., would you give us a ride?" And he'd get up there, get in the car, and he'd drive us to school. Now, when I was coming on, people didn't have cars. Very few people had a car. And that's a luxury to me, to ride in a car. O.C. Hill, yes, I knew O.C. Hill very well. O.C. Hill used to call my mother Mom. O.C. Hill every Sunday morning after church, Sunday school, he'd stop by my mom's house, go in the refrigerator, drink a pop, eat a piece of cake. Very wonderful man. Very handy with things. I know he did a lot of handy work around my mom's house. Very well.
What about in terms of any of his activism and his? I know he was on city council for years and years. Anything that he did to help the city and the North End, or just people in general?
Yes, O.C. was, I would say, very instrumental in getting Black's job in Mansfield Tire, I think Westinghouse, and yeah, he's a very good intermediary for black people to get jobs in different places. Yes, he was. Also, I'd like to mention that also one that a lot of people didn't recognize it or understand what he did was Middlebrook, Mr. Middlebrook. Now this man was a tenacious guy. He never gave up. I would say that he's instrumental in getting Bowman Street School integrated. He stayed on Lily Street, that's where he was. And I think because of his activism, he was let go from his job. He worked at the Westinghouse. I think that he was let go because of his active participation and stuff like that. And also to me, he's the first black man I know of that was an insurance man, sold insurance. And I don't know if you'd like to say I was a product of his, that he was trying to, when Ferguson got that money, whatever he did. Well, Mr. Ferguson bought a lot of property out off of Bowman Street. And it just sat there for a long time. So I don't know how Mr. Middlebrook got involved with it. But anyways, he wanted to try to build an allotment out there. And I was the person they selected. And so he asked me, I just got out of service, if I'd do it. Oh yeah. So he got the plans for the contractor, whoever it was, to build a house, and it was my house. It'd be my house for me. I'd be the one that's doing it. And okay, now one of the hardest things that he had about that was getting it financed. You know why?
I imagine racial prejudice?
No.
No? Okay.
Banks would not loan black people money. Mortgages.
Tell us about that.
Okay. Well, I wasn't too well aware of it until I actually got involved with this. And then I got to thinking about it. Now, I don't know everybody's business or anything like that, but if you could try to find out how many in the 40s and 50s had a mortgage. They bought their homes on land contract.
So what did that mean?
Land
Explain
contract.
that to us. Yeah.
Say like you own a house, and so you want to move. Instead of you selling your house, you say, you stay in this house. Well, like apartment, like leasing, what you want to call it now, but it's land contract. You let me buy a house. You say you pay me so much a month. You take your utilities and this and that, and after whatever amount of money it is paid, it's yours. All right, that's land contract.
Okay, now how much of, how do I want to phrase this? Do you think that contributed to the sort of, when you talked about the neighborhood becoming more of a black neighborhood, did that contribute to the fact that all
Right.
the white folks had left?
Well, they left because now they could borrow money to get a house.
Right.
Now I know my mom, well, my dad died when I was young, but he had bought the house. Okay, now, because I did it quite a few times, that I never paid attention to it, but she'd always tell me, here's your money, go up to Citizens Bank. It was Citizens Bank, and pay it. But the name of the account was in another man's name. It wasn't my mother's name, it wasn't my dad's name. It was in whoever had owned that property before, in their name. And you make a payment on that thing. And they write it out in a little book.
So at some point though, did the name, did it get transferred over to your family's
Yeah,
name?
well, my mother paid it off.
Okay, when it did, but it's not like you guys just in perpetuity,
No,
just
when,
forever.
when it got, you set amount, say if it was $10,000.
Okay.
Back then, $10,000, a lot of money. Okay. Once you pay $10,000, I mean, you had a set amount each month that you paid. You know that. And then when the amount was paid, it became yours. You got the deed to the property. All right? Now, we'll get back to me. All right? Now, this project with Mr. Middlebrook, we went through it to build this house. It's out on Crawl Road, off of Bowman Street. He had the contract, everything set up to build the house. And he got the house built. Was getting it built. But then he had the problem, he was doing this. He's going to do it, you know, in my name and everything else, but he was doing it, going through. He could not get a loan from a bank, wouldn't put a mortgage in my name. Loan company wouldn't do it, you know, like say Mansfield Building Loan, you know, stuff like that. They wouldn't do it. But you have what do you call them, mortgage companies, okay. Now, the only mortgage company, they had an office here, but their main place was in Columbus, is a mortgage company. And it was going through them. And then People's Federal came to Mansfield. Up there, I don't know, across from Renaissance Theater, that building there, that used to be People's. They came to Mansfield, People's Federal, let me have the loan. No bank, no loan company, no mortgage company in Mansfield would deal with me.
Now, what year was
Well,
that?
blah, blah. 63. 62, it started in 62, it'd be 63.
Wow, that's deep.
You ask pivotal, these things, they affect me, but I learned a lesson
Sure.
about life, people, finances, what this color meant to some people. So, yeah, they'll do it. People's Federal. Now, why did People's Federal do it? Because the federal government would let you make federal, FHA or whatever it is. Because of that, they were involved with that program.
Interesting. Okay. Do you have any questions
No,
or anything? Yeah, I think unless you have anything you want to add, I mean, we've covered a lot of ground today. So.
Whatever you want to ask. They asked me to come and talk to you. I'll talk to you.
Hey, well, we really appreciate
Yeah,
it.
this
We
is a really good
It's
interview.
great,
Yeah.
man.
can't thank you enough.
Enlightening.
So.